To another episode of the Swords and Sports Podcast. I am your host, Mike Mogues, and you are on the Fantasy Podcast that is committed to reading 52 fantasy books in 52 weeks and creating 52 podcasts documenting the experience. This week, I'm dumb excited to be joined by the fantastic, legendary, I don't know if he's legendary, but I'm going to give him that moniker, Gareth Hanrahan, to talk about his incredible series, The Black Iron Legacy. Specifically, we're talking book 1, The Gutter Prayer. That interview is coming up after all these announcements and book details, so please stick around. You don't want to miss this. That guy is wild. He was one of the few people, and everybody to some degree does this, but he would give all my ideas legs and try to make them work. And if you are a longtime listener to this show, you know I pitched some absolutely terrible ideas. But he really did make some of them work. Shout out to Orbit. We will be coming with many book proposals, including some Voltron fanfic. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you gotta stick around. You can find this podcast on all your podcast listening platforms. Well, Mike, what are those podcast listening platforms? I'll never ask a question in the third person again because that sounded terrible. But if you were curious, you can find this on Spotify. You can find this on iTunes. You can find this on Amazon, whatever they're doing. They're at Google Play, which I think is dead, and I keep mentioning it, but I don't think it exists anymore. But if you can find it, I'm sure the podcast is on there as well. And some other things like Stitcher. I saw someone that was like Owl or some crap. But if you want to go have a hoot, you can find the podcast there, or you can shut it off after that joke. Also, I'm building out the YouTube channel. I've been posting all the podcast episodes on there, having a ton of fun with that. That's where I'm getting the clips for the Instagram account from. Also, posting clips of the episodes. Gotta do a better job of that. Plan on making a whole bunch of them soon. So stay prepared. Be prepared. Man, I got a lot of bad energy coming out. And that's what Gareth did to me. Him in his squeaky ass chair. Let's get into these book details. I didn't write them out, so this might be a little messy. The book is The Gutter Prayer. The author is Gareth Hanrahan. It was published on June 17th, 2019 by Orbit. So, he is a traditionally published author. Shout out to him for getting that book deal by reading the tea leaves of Twitter. If you don't know what that means, once again, stay tuned. It is 512 pages in its paperback edition, so on the longer side. But it is a wild ride the whole time. Man, am I killing it or what? The series is The Black Iron Legacy. I called it a trilogy. He hates trilogies. Don't call it a trilogy because he's putting out more of them. What awards did this win? Well, it is a BookNest Award for the best debut novel. That's a biggie. Shout out to him. What are the other books in the series? I'm tempted to just call it a trilogy because I know it annoys him, but I'm trying to build relationships here. So you can't burn all bridges. The next book is The Shadow Saint. Ooh. And the recently published The Broken God. So if you haven't picked those up yet, put it on your list. Get it done. It's your fault for not doing it. Yes, I'm pointing at a camera that nobody's responding to. Have I lost it? I don't know. You read 76 books in a row and tell me how your sanity's doing. As a quick heads up, I don't know how else to say this. This podcast is a spoilers podcast. It contains tons of spoilers for The Gutter Prayer by Gareth Hanrahan. Tons of them. It also contains spoilers for the other two books, which I didn't ask for, but since I already spoiled the book 1, Gareth spoiled the rest of it for me. I'm just kidding. They're like minor spoilers that, quite frankly, I already forgot. So, consider this your warning. Without further ado, Gareth Hanrahan. This thing. Yeah. I know, I hate when it says that. Every guest in the lay, I think they just added that feature like a month ago. Everybody's been shocked by it.
Yeah, I haven't seen that before. But I've seen little happy recording thing in the corner, but never the this is being recorded before.
Right. They're everywhere. They're everywhere, Gareth. Welcome to another week of the Swords and Sports podcast. I am beyond excited because I am joined by BookNest and Eddie Any. Oh my God, we even worked on the pronunciation of that before this. Award-winning author of the Black Iron Legacy, Gareth Hanrahan. Welcome to the show.
No,
We're here to talk about the gutter prayer, but I got some questions first. You described yourself in an interview as having absurd legs. What constitutes absurd?
oh dear God, we're starting with the somewhat obscure and personal, are we? Basically, I have very long legs or disproportionately long legs. So when I'm sitting down, I appear to be of relatively normal height, and then I get up and I tend to tower above people. I'm like 6'3", but
Oh my.
taller than I appear at first glance. So it's all in the
now,
leg.
these knees went on to win an award.
But Jesus, we are getting obscure and personal right off the bat. Um, right. How do I phrase this? Um, the exact order of events was number one. My mother, when I was 6, told me I had lovely knees. At
Okay.
another point, I was about years later, I was going to lift up a friend of mine. I was in the back seat of her car, and as you established, my legs are quite long, so my knees were digging into her back as she was driving. She complained. I said, "I'll have you know I have lovely knees. This has been attested to by my late mother." She laughed so much she nearly crashed the car. My knees became a sort of a joke slash meme in our friend group. Another friend demanded to see my knees at a convention. Um, because we were in a pub and some of us were drunk, he had to contribute to the convention's charity auction to see my knees. Several years later, Irish Conventions won the Diana Jones Award, which is this tabletop gaming award, which for various things it's sort of like a sort of omnipurpose award for cool stuff. And because at the time the Irish economy was quite good and Irish gaming conventions were bringing in incredible amounts of money for charity, we won that award. Because my knees had contributed to a small part of one of those charity auctions, they were therefore award-winning knees.
this
Anyway,
this story is ridiculous. I love that.
you're the one who brought it up. I was never. I don't go around putting it on my CV or anything. I don't say Gareth Hanrahan has award-winning knees. It is a series of in jokes that has gone out onto the internet.
I think you need a new Twitter bio. That that to me is impressive stuff right there.
You are clearly easily impressed.
Yeah, maybe so, but I thought I was difficult to impress. Speaking of Twitter, you're getting into the alternate account burner game, right? This started in April. Twitter was down. You're talking about having an alternate account. Are you trolling people now on that?
Does have an alter account? I can't recall that at all. What's that? No, I don't do an alter account. I try and avoid trolling people in general. Seem to be very polite. Well, I mean, one of my earliest experiences online many years ago was I posted on Usenet, which young people will not know of, but
Yeah, I
it's
don't
basically, oh dear God, you are young. Right,
know.
long ago, before the web, there was Usenet, which was the discussion forums.
Okay.
Um, there were various forums, and there was one called Alt Horror Cthulhu, which is dedicated to the Cthulhu mythos. And me, in my first week on the internet, posted a rant about this Brian Lumley book, and Brian Lumley shut up and flamed me.
No
Uh,
way.
yeah, so my first interaction on the internet was basically being shouted at by an author. So ever since then, I've tried to be polite. So I do not have a Twitter account.
Now, do you think more kids should have to go through that? An internet week one?
I don't know. I mean, it was certainly a formative experience, but I mean, poor Brian Lumley is quite old at this point and probably doesn't have time to flame everyone on the internet because there are lots on the internet now. There weren't quite so many back then. And also, I wouldn't recommend like starting out your experience being shouted at by someone you. But I still think the book was terrible. But anyway, look, someone has had a storied career in horror fiction and fantasy, and sold out more books than I have.
You know what? At least you're being honest, and
I
that's
tried
well
to.
appreciated. That's funny that I guess that's your review. One of the funny things that I was picking up, and maybe not funny as much as interesting, is when you mentioned the difference between the two types of things you've published. You
Mhm.
mentioned that for the role playing books, like if someone has a problem with it, the publisher can go, "Well, you're playing the game wrong."
Well,
Um,
not just playing the game wrong, but like here are ways you can like fix your game. If you like here like tweaks you can make the combat system. You might be like you're misinterpreting a rule. Here's like a way to get the campaign back on track or whatever. If like because it's a product that someone uses as opposed to a finished work of entertainment that you just consume.
right. And you said you can't do that for books. My question is, why not? Why can't you tell people they're reading it wrong if they have something mean to say?
Okay, I've been told you can't. I was told like you cannot go to reviewers and go, yes, you might feel that, but like here's what I was trying to do, or here's why you're wrong. Apparently, that's frowned upon, even when you're trying to be helpful. Um, you can't even go like yes, I can see why you're finding the first like 5 chapters boring, but I'm trying to set things up. So, but no,
Yeah.
apparently you're not allowed. It's frowned upon to engage in that way, which was a bit of a culture shock when I switched from gaming to writing art.
Well, I've known you for about 10 minutes, and I'm willing to be the sword that you can use to strike out at reviewers.
Well, what sugar the reviewers? Reviewers are like lovely people who review books and like are therefore involved in selling books, which is a good thing. So,
Okay.
but thank you for the support. And should I find a review that is like sufficiently misguided that I can no longer sit on my hands and my orbit publicist doesn't shout at me before I respond, I should go to you and blame you.
That I'm willing to accept that. I'm willing to take up that mantle for you.
Not so much a sword as a shield, really.
I just think, you get a lot of trolls on Goodreads. If they review a book before it's published or something like that, I'll be like, you're reading it wrong.
Well,
I don't know.
you're not reading it at all. But yeah,
All right. Um, I had a question. When can I get to play this RPG that your child made? Because I'm very interested in the character of what was it, the hay baler?
yeah, he has moved on. He's an 8-year-old and is in that sort of like age of unfettered creativity. So this morning he couldn't sleep, or last night he couldn't sleep either, and drew this picture of this nightmarish thing with like 4 arms and like labeled claws and like this like skull face, and it had a hat on it. I mean,
I'm gonna be honest. I was too scared to ask about that. I didn't know what was going on with that. I just left that where it was.
neither do I, to be perfectly honest. Yeah, 8-year-olds are disturbing creatures.
I don't know. I thought the hay baler that has a lot of legs under it.
Yeah, I mean, I, at some point maybe he'll return to that early sort of like creative hummus of his childhood and do something with it, and I shall encourage it and like market it instead and say, make a cut.
One
That's
of the
what else
things
can
that
parents do.
yeah, you might want to save that picture, put that in a file, and then show the other end of that. Like we could be creepy and we could be creative. Those two things don't have to be mutually exclusive.
Yeah, although to be honest, like speaking as a writer and quote unquote creative person, one really wants one's child to get like some like sort of stable and lucrative career, like accountant or something.
Don't get a liberal arts degree. Come, you heard it here first.
He may be doomed by his genes.
I don't know. I think you've done pretty well for yourself. I commonly hear you talking about how you got laid off and you thought that you had money for 3 months. You're like, let me give this a shot, and you haven't gone back yet.
No, I've managed to avoid going back to the real world for nearly 20 years at this point, and I'm going to continue to avoid it as long as I can.
Have you sent that company any copies of your books?
No, I have not. I think they've probably gone bust or being bought, and also didn't really enjoy working there at all. So
I thought more as an ego thing, like, ha, you laid me off, look at me now.
yeah, I possibly should. At this point, I don't think anyone there who's like still there from the time I was there. So it would just be a really, really odd threat to like, so like, random strangers go, here's a book, take it. And they go, who are you? And they go, ha, I go, ha, 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 and run out.
I don't know. It's the ultimate revenge.
It's not ultimate revenge, but the ultimate revenge is like, I don't know, destroying their lives. This is just sort of like, bizarre situations revenge. Like, unsolvable mystery and then run away. Well, she wouldn't be unsolvable. My name is on the cover. So like, yeah,
They might
what I
figure that
should
one
do,
out.
yeah, what I should do logically is show up with an anonymous manuscript. I just hand them this like, 500-page unpublished fantasy novel and run away and never explain it. But that does sound like a lot of effort to like things aren't there anymore. So take that corporate entity that let me go 20 years ago.
You showed them. I kind of like this. I feel like we're having a good brainstorm here. You know what manuscript you could provide? I've got it. Do you still have your Voltron fanfic from third grade?
Christ, it's like, have you listened to every interview and like a random podcast I've done ever?
No, I won't listen to Wizards, Warriors, and Words.
Ah, right, fair enough. Um,
Uh,
I do not still have my Voltron fanfic from third class. Um, it has lost to the mists of time. I have many other files, but that was the brief period before I had a computer, because I would have been, 8 at the time.
it would have been impressive if you still had it.
Yeah, I don't think it was very good though.
You don't think third grade that's probably the writing level I'm at.
I remember being quite nervous of it being like, literal fanfic where I was like caught because everyone in the class had reciting the opening, like, in the beginning there were like 5 lions or something, and have you all read this? And they went, no, it's a cartoon. There's a brief actually where the teacher was really impressed, thinking that like, written the story and the entire class had read it and all loved it so much they knew the opening lines. And then he worked out there was actually a TV program I was writing about.
Yeah. That's hysterical. Like, oh my god, we've got a boy genius in here. Oh wait, no, we've got to play trouser.
Exactly, yeah. Although I did read an interview today from the Taoiseach, the equivalent of the Prime Minister of Ireland, where he was praising the very same teacher.
Wait, what?
Well, he went to the same school that I did, only like a few years beforehand. He had the same teacher. He was saying like that Tom Land was the best teacher he ever had, and he wasn't a great teacher.
Talk about burying the lead on that. You had a cool story there, and wouldn't have came out.
Ireland is very, very small. It is not that hard to be like, close to the head of state or anything. So
that is it is kind of funny. When I was in Ireland, I was visiting cousins, and they knew just random people in the streets of Dublin. I was like, what is going on here?
It's a small country. It's a small, somewhat inbred country. So
I don't know about that. They'd be a little harsh. Okay. You get asked this all the time about the second person perspective in the prologue. My question is, have you thought about mixing it up and going like fourth person or fifth person?
What would fourth or fifth person?
I'm not the writer. It was just a question.
That's fair enough. Yeah. I mean, well, how would that work? We stand, okay, the plural. They stand on that crop of grid. I'll look into it.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate you giving that question some legs and trying to come up with an answer.
Yeah, one tries to be both truthful and to entertain any question, no matter how bizarre, especially.
That I do have some bizarre questions. I got another one for you. Why not? Who was the 10th century scribe that was subtweeting you?
Oh, I don't know. It was we have had a fairly lengthy lockdown here in Ireland.
So yeah, I've heard.
For the first time in like literal months, the other day and like wandered around grabbing random books, and I picked up this book on medieval bodies, but like basically medieval conceptions of medicine and like the association of different parts of the body and stuff. One of these random books you grab just to sort of see what's in it and see if it sparks anything, because like you get ideas from the weirdest places. And yeah, there was this medieval scribe who was basically talking about how hard writing is. Going, yeah, this guy gets it.
Wow, what some things never change, I guess.
Well, there's a fantastic line from like it's like Babylon or something, like children these days are disobedient. The government is corrupt, and everyone's writing a book. The 5th century BC or something. Yes, never change.
Wow, that's actually crazy. Why? I guess some everybody thinks they've got an original hot take. I guess nobody really does.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there were hot takes being engraved on clay slabs.
For I guess the ultimate validation for a retweet is just someone carved it into another slab and pass that around.
Yeah. Check out this. You've seen the bronze, the tablets complaining about the quality of some guy's copper, haven't you?
No, what is it?
I'll dig it up for you, but there is this famous one of the earliest pieces of writing that has survived is this guy saying basically, your copper is terrible, you give us really crap copper. We take this copper back, give us our money back. It is the worst copper ever, and you're a fraud. And the complaint letter has been preserved through God knows how many thousands of years of human history. And this guy, the one remedy we have this entire civilization pretty much is your copper is terrible, take it back.
You know what? In 2,000 years, someone's going to take a look at it like the first ever tweet, and they're going to be like, that's a complaint at a company. And that's going to be like, nothing has changed. Everything is cyclical. I love that idea that
reviewers are trying to be less reviewers. Don't point out when they're wrong, because who knows 2,000 years.
That is crazy. I love that the first thing was just someone so pissed off that they had to write a complaint and try to publicize it.
Here I have it. The complaint tablet to El Nazir was a clay tablet that was sent to ancient Ur, written circa 1750 BC. It's complete from merchant El Nazir from a customer named Nani. Written in Akkadian cuneiform, it is the oldest known written complaint, as in the British Museum. Nani also claimed that the servant had been treated rudely.
The first Karen.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah, Nani and El Nazir, the first issue.
This is what you could do with your alternate Twitter account. You could, every time someone complains at someone, you could just post that story underneath and be like, "Look, you're not very unique in this."
I am certain that someone has an El Nazir complaint bot. There's every other bot.
Yeah, that feels like a Reddit thing that has to happen right away.
Well, it's like what, Rule 34 or whatever. Now that we have thought of it, someone has already done it.
That's upsetting.
Yeah,
I like to think I'm original over here.
It's the internet. It's all about execution.
Speaking of Twitter, when you posted that 1 like equals 1 project idea thing, at what number were you like, oh shit, I don't have this many ideas?
Oh, well, I mean, the part, I was really filled it out. So I mentioned it over the weekend and failed to. So it's basically like 1 like equals 1 project I want to do. I mean, I have 10 or 20 projects that are always sort of written in the back of my head. And I also find that I work really well when I'm prompted or respond. I'm good, be handed an assignment and that sort of sparks ideas. So basically, I'm hoping that I'll write out those 10 or 20 ideas and then have another 30 to fill out and go, I need to do a book about copper complaints. This guy, he gets complained about copper and it's going to take revenge on the customer. El Nazir's revenge. There we go. That's one day.
Oh my god! Look at that! You just came up. Let's call Orbit up. Let's get that going.
I probably want a bit more, flesh in the bones than copper complaints.
You
That
know,
could be a whole new genre though, especially if I do it in Akkadian.
okay, there you
You
go.
know, Akkadian cuneiform, I think, is the new Grimdark.
You heard it here first.
Exactly.
You're just an ideas machine. Holy shit. I might have to save this pocket. I don't want the public seeing this.
Again, ideas are the easy part. It's all down to the actual writing part. It's the hard
Well,
bit.
the execution, right?
Yeah, the theme and everything.
You know, I believe in you though, because when you were trying to find a home for the gutter prayer, you were reading the tea leaves of Twitter, and I've never heard of this before. So if you're the one who can do it, what do the tea leaves of Twitter say about this new idea? You know what? You can
Well,
get back to me on that.
I don't know. I'll have to basically tweet about it and see what happens, and see if there's a deal endlessly or pot and respond, and leap on the idea, shouting, "Yes, yes, yes! The market is crying out for Akkadian cuneiform. We're tired of this, Babylonian Linear A nonsense."
All right. I think we're ready to get right into these book questions. We might these ideas are gonna get wilder if I keep this going. So this is the book. It's right behind your left ear as well for people who are watching the video. Look at that. You pointed right at it. That's a pro right there.
Well practiced doing that. I got my whole sort of
Woo! Man, that's looking pretty. My first question was, how scarred were you by the candle in Beauty and the Beast that you created the Tallow Man?
I've never seen Beauty and the Beast. I'm vague. I was never Disney wasn't a thing when I thought Disney wasn't a thing when I was growing up. I'm not 100 years old. Just we didn't have videos, and I just never was especially exposed to Disney as a child. So while I was vaguely aware that there were dancing candles and thing, that was never the inspiration. It was more just, I don't know. I find wax a really disturbing substance. Basically, it's just wrong, and wax figures as well are famously sinister. And I mean, certainly the early chapters of the Gutter Prayer, I was writing not quite stream of consciousness, but it was very much sort of I had no idea where I was going or what was going on. So it just sort of popped up, and there it was.
I thought that was gonna be the candles in Beauty and the Beast, or you were visiting a Yankee Candle factory and fell in, and you're like, oh my god, this is terrifying.
I'm not the Joker, nor was meant to
be. On the other end, at one point, were you on the beach and a seagull attacked you, tried to eat one of your chips or something, and you're like, Goldman?
Again, I don't know. There's also single inciting supervillain origin bit. Just if you look at certain things closely, they're bloody weird. And have this frenetic, beady-eyed, single-minded, flying piranha attitude towards food. And it's I like the contrast of this tiny little bird head and a big muscly body.
It's horrifying.
Yeah, I mean that's what a lot of horror and weird fantasy is, taking two disparate ideas and just jamming them together. My stuff Chimera or Manticore or something here's this monster, face of man, body of lion, scorpion tail, bat wings, hammer them until they all fit together. There, monster for the
yeah, those things are terrifying. So is a gull head. I had a question about who wins in a fight, a crawling one or a gull head?
Crawling one probably. I mean, all the gull head really has is a lot of hatred and anger and muscle, whereas the crawling ones have lots of magic. I guess maybe if you made a gull head out of a crow or something, eats worms for a better chance.
So
constituent bits, but I would improve anything bet on the crawling ones.
Okay, but I have a counter argument. If the early bird gets the worm, what if the gull head was just early? Then it would be able.
Okay, if the crawling one is taken by surprise and is not really with it, and so, such parts get gobbled up. But the issue is you've got to get them all. Like if one worm crawls off, it'll come back.
That's true.
And take revenge.
Because then you wouldn't be early anymore. You'd be late, and then
Exactly, yeah.
dead.
The late worm takes revenge.
Speaking of my favorite worm, who seemed to have a hard time of things, Jermis Thay. He does not have a good run in this book.
Well, we're at the spoiler zone, are we already?
Oh yeah, we're on spoilers. Spoiler warnings included heavily.
Exactly. I mean, he has a moderately good run in that he nearly succeeds with his plan to remake the gods and fulfill his lifetime ambition and so forth. But yeah, he then gets burnt to death the second time. Wasn't really on his agenda. But with him, I'm determined not to bring him back at any point. Book 3 touches lightly on his backstory and so forth, but I've so many characters have come back from the dead in various forms. I'm going, right, no. Some people are definitely staying dead, and he's one of them.
Well, I thought, you come so close to success so many times, eventually maybe something's got to go in your favor. But when you hit your plans on having the right girl and you've got the wrong one, you're not setting yourself up for success.
No. Well, he was very desperate at that point. Carrie had done a lot of the work in reawakening the Black Iron Gods just by wandering around being the herald. So he could have bodged something together. He was hands-on kind of, well, maybe not hands, but whatever, worms-on kind of guy at that point who was willing to give it a shot anyway. If it wasn't for pesky betrayals and so forth, and
those pesky kids,
yeah, exactly, and Saints of Flaming Swords, he could have been a contender.
He was a big player. He had a kind of quick downfall once he was like, oh, this is the wrong girl. Oh, there's a flaming sword. Oh, I'm screwed.
He was a big player in Guerdon, but the arena has gotten wider and wider as the books go on. So
you gotta admire it. Hey, you never get the things you don't try to get. So
he had a plan. He executed it. He got quite far, but events turned against him.
Did the Fever Knight ever consider taking Advil?
I mean, he would presumably be pumped full of the alchemical equivalent thereof. He was on basically a lot of painkillers and sedatives and so forth, but he was just so horribly messed up inside the armor that it wasn't going to affect him that much. And presumably at some point Hanrahan had started swapping out the Advil for PCP or something. Swapping out the magical equivalent of Advil for the magical equivalent of PCP, given he was useful as a psychotic killing machine.
But not very useful at breaking a fever. So,
well, he was the knight who had a fever, as opposed to call if you were sick, unless you wanted to be rapidly put out of your misery.
Actually, you wouldn't be allowed to get into most places because they're doing temperature checks. Kind of inconvenient.
Yes, but he was fully masked the whole time, so halfway there.
That's true. Hey, can't call him an anti-masker. That's big. I had this vision of Spar in the one-on-one just being throwing Advil at him, being like, "You're just the knight now." No, all right.
One thing at that point, Spar's manual dexterity would have been fairly limited given the whole stone man thing. So let's get really, really lucky with throwing the Advil into the guy's mouth. Again, he was masked. Wouldn't have worked that well. Well, he did take the fever down by drowning him in a canal. So
well, that's good, right? You're supposed to put a wet cloth on your hand, like a damp cloth on your head. So
it wasn't a brawl to death. It was just Spar being helpful, dear sir, you look a bit overheated. You just step into this canal where you're going to take a bath. Oops, I seem to have fallen on top of you and drowned you. Oh well.
Hey, credit to Spar for trying. He didn't have to do that.
That's true. Many brawls turn out to be misunderstandings.
Speaking of the stone men, most people spend their whole life trying to get a statue made of them. So would you say that it's actually a good thing?
Well, most people don't want to be entombed alive in their statue. I mean, okay, let me rephrase that. I do not want to be entombed alive in a statue. Most people I have met are also anti that. Maybe there's a large community out there who want to be entombed alive in a statue, and I realize as I'm saying this that there is definitely some fetish community out there who want to be alive in a statue. But speaking, like, I can only write for myself and my own interests, and I do not want to be turned to stone and live in, be like, entombed in pain until my internal organs finally give out. I'm anti that.
Yeah, but I'm going to say that's because you have a legacy. Like, you've published books. People are going to remember you through that. Most people aren't going to leave a legacy. So if they leave a statue of themselves, at least people will be like, yeah, I remember him.
It's true. I can see the point. I'm still unsure. I appreciate your marketing attempt for the stone plague. Be remembered, turn to stone.
Yeah, I mean, there's downsides to everything. Yeah, there's no pain, no gain, or glory, or whatever the expression is.
I think this is like a marketing pitch from Medusa or something, like,
Yeah, I guess she was the first.
Exactly, yeah. It's like a tourist trap. Like, you go to her island, you get, like, the little, like, seashells macrame to a piece of paper, the, like, little tchotchkes, and you get turned to stone, like a holiday memento to remember.
It's a lot better than doing like those penny things where you throw a coin in and it flattens it out.
Exactly. I've never seen the point. I've never seen the point of those. You waste a perfectly good penny.
I know. Think of all you could do with that. You could get like half a piece of gum.
Exactly. Yeah. You're lucky.
Speaking of the stone plague, I've got a quote that that could apply to many different situations. You remember the panic, the debates about internment, about quarantines?
Yeah. I must say that was like, well, it wasn't super prescient, but certainly it was an odd resonance last year. But yeah, I mean, pandemics and disease were a huge part of our history, and I mean, one thing that always fascinates me is how weird the period we've all lived in is. Like, there's a fantastic quote by, like, the financial advisor of Oxford University or something.
Okay.
He asked for his, like, assessment, and his letter was basically, yeah, the last 500 years have been very strange. And we should. So I feel like I've been reading this, like, history of the Habsburg dynasty.
Okay.
A little book I grabbed randomly in the bookstore.
Yeah, these are
And
all over the place.
yeah, that's very much like, everything's very normal. Lots of wars, lots of wars, lots of wars, lots of territory changing, and then the last, like, 200 years, like, you've got this ancient history basically going, what the hell is going on? Suddenly there's, like, technology and revolutions and, like, countries and people not respecting us and not like, give us our feudal dues, and it's like, hang on, the Turks have stopped being an issue. Where did the Turks go? Bring back the Turks.
Yeah, something that we know what's up with, something we can handle,
Yeah, I mean, we live in odd times. So when we zoom back out, you sort of see how odd those times are.
To pan out, that's good. You got a mind for this. What is a ghoul's favorite part to eat?
Oh, it depends on the person. Because the ghouls are psychopods, they're basically carriers of the souls of the dead. It would depend on basically where your soul energy would reside in your body, and that's going, because in the setting the soul is to a degree the sort of, like, agitation of the magical field and so forth. It would depend on how you've agitated the magical field unconsciously in your life. So, for example, if you are a writer, it's probably going to reside in your hands or your brain or something. If you're an artist, it's probably going to be in your eyes. If you really enjoyed food, it might be in your belly. If you were this, like, great romantic, it could be in your heart or something. So basically, to get the full appreciation and to, like, really understand the person, or to get the best part of the soul, you need to understand the person.
So, would the ghouls eat your knees?
Oh, they eat my knees. Oh, dear God. Interesting question. Not what I have previously contemplated. I would suspect that the answer would be that a truly talented and sensitive ghoul would appreciate that the whole knee thing isn't deeply rooted in my identity, and it's just this like things have been attached to me. But if you had some casual, like sort of fly-by-night ghoul who really wasn't paying too much precisely, and had just sort of skimmed the reading, they go, yeah, it's in the knees. Get the knees, boys. Chow down on those kneecaps. That's where his soul resides. This is a very conversation.
This is the only type I seem to have. You want a stranger question? If Carrie and Mirren are both ravelers, when they bang, is that incest?
They're not both revelers. Mirren was basically grown in a vat and or was grown in a vat, but was subject to all sorts of weird experiments by his father. But Ungent didn't have access to any of the revelers because basically
Right.
Jareth, they got this one. Is it incest? They're not blood relatives by any means. That said, they are both sort of like spiritually designed to be the same entity in some ways. It's not a healthy relationship.
It gets murkier the more you look into it.
Oh yeah, it was deliberately, well, deliberately is possibly me blowing my own trumpet so much, but it was never intended to be a healthy or even reasonable relationship. That basically they were both being sort of it was sort of a way to show that basically the gods get into your heads and affect you in ways you're not really conscious of. It's not just the god is a voice in your head saying go here and do this. That it sort of imprints on every part of you, and you're what we would unconscious or just purely biological actions can be affected by this divine presence looming on you. One thing that really fascinates me is basically that how these utterly inhuman entities would impinge on humanity. So that's where that came from.
All right. Is Guildmaster Rosha the smartest person in the whole book? Because getting wax versions of yourself to do your day job is everybody's dream.
Yes. I mean, possible spoilers for future books, but yes, she is the smartest person in the books.
I don't care about anything else she accomplishes. That to me was the smartest thing. You don't have to work. You could just send your wax version.
But you see, given she was a highly driven and obsessive person and a genius, her action wouldn't be aha, I will send wax shooters myself to do the boring stuff. It should be awesome. Now I can do 10 jobs at once and can get stuff done, as opposed to having to rely on these idiots who don't have a tenth of my intellect.
Well, then I'm going to take it back. Creating clones of yourself to do more work is the stupidest thing ever. I rescind my previous question.
You just don't have a drive. You just don't have that get up and conquer the world attitude you need to be the Kilbast of the Alchemists.
All right, well, that's not me. Is Dretcher the winner in all this? His business is basically like cleanup duty, and the city is a mess.
Well, he's identified his little niche and was doing quite well for himself until book 3. Have you not read book 3 yet?
No, we're just doing gutter prayer.
All right, fair enough. Oh my god, okay. Hyper spoilers.
You could spoil it. I'm spoiling the first one.
It is actually, it happens fairly early on, but in book 3, Dredger, having enjoyed a measure of success, gets his yard burnt down as a sort of a warning to other people in his line of work that there's a new boss in town. But he survives and will be continuing on trying to earn a penny. Actually, Dredger, just for sort of inside baseball, have you read William Gibson's Sprawl trilogy?
No, I haven't.
Oh, okay. For those who have, Dredger was heavily inspired by the Finn in those books, who basically he shows up in all 3 of the Neuromancer book or the Sprawl books, Neuromancer, Count Zero, and Mona Lisa Overdrive, and basically he is this sort of fixer and tech guy in the first book, and shows up again in the second book as this sort of cranky guy in a shop, and then by book 3 he has reduced this AI in an alleyway. But I just love the idea of this sort of relatively minor background character who keeps showing up and sort of,
Right.
adds sort of thread of narrative continuity, and is cranky about things.
I love it.
Go read Neuromancer. Stop doing this podcast. And, fantastic. It's short as well.
I'll get on that. Let me ask some more questions before I just cut off and start reading a different book series. Is the Talaman's worst enemy Smokey the Bear?
Well, they're an entirely urban group, so they're like there would be no forest fires, given any forest near Gordon probably been wiped out by acid rain long ago. Actually, again, I'm sort of hyper spoiling because I am planning in a future book to have Talaman in a wood, but yeah, I mean there's even a scene in the Gutter Prayer where basically they're trying to avoid getting their wicks or getting their flames blown out, so they're all sort of holding their heads at weird angles to avoid the wind. I like monsters that have I don't want to say stupid weaknesses, but sort of bizarre. These creatures are faster, stronger, tougher than humans, but at the same time they have these distinctive drawbacks. Like the same with vampires. I've done a lot of stuff with Dracula, various games.
Award-winning stuff.
Thank you very much.
There you go. Plug it all. There you go. Wow.
I would say I'm not proud. I'm not changed. That's the one. But yeah, I love that vampires can shapeshift and turn to mist and are super fast and super strong and control your mind, but can't trust running water and can have to be invited in, or there's the whole Chinese vampire thing,
right.
Still rights to countess and so forth.
They can't go to Olive Garden. There's a whole bunch of stuff.
He could go to Olive Garden because it's a public place. He wouldn't he wouldn't enjoy it. He'd be
But all the garlic.
Well, just tell him. I mean, and also the garlic flower is more than the actual smell of garlic. So
okay.
I don't know. Clearly what we need is a vampire and a restaurant ticket.
I've got some novella ideas. I'm gonna pitch them. They're awful. Just as a heads up.
We already sold Orbit on El Nazir's saga of El Nazir's complaint. So
the problem is you came up with that, so that's gonna be your idea.
Well, I'm happy to share credit. I'm good at collaborating.
My novella idea is instead of a second person prologue from the perspective, we're gonna do it from the perspective of the iPhone screen.
Ooh, interesting.
I got one more if that doesn't have any legs. Don't worry.
Years ago, I wrote a terrible short story where the sort of the big twist was you were inside a packet of cigarettes all along.
Whoa.
Yeah, I don't know what I was doing.
I like that.
I think I just really wanted to describe the inside packet of cigarettes. I'm not quite sure why. Anyway, idea 2. Go on.
All right. One of my favorite characters, he's got a brief stint in this, is Marlowe, the guy who sleeps through everything. I want a novella of just him waking up, being like, what the fuck happened?
That there is an anthology idea. Marlowe wakes. He was Marlowe on a dozen different battlefields. And each story is basically him wake. It'd be like Sir Quantum Leap or something, where he wakes up with, where was I? Where did I fall asleep?
Till he one day. Oh well, I mean he does blow up. Rest in peace. That one was sad. I think that guy is fascinating to me because I admire that ability.
To fall asleep anywhere. Yeah. Well, I mean, you read. There are a couple of things when you're reading a book where you know how the author was feeling at that time. And I noticed that in my books, I'm often writing about characters being really, really tired.
That's how you get an inside look. Look into the mind. Look at your mind. Now we know what we're getting.
Yeah, or look at George R. R. Martin's books and the lengthy descriptions of food. I mean,
that's it. Talk about subtweet.
I am quietly confident he won't hear this. Then again, if he does, hi George.
Shoot for the moon. He's gonna be a guest one day. Have some faith in me.
That is very true. I take it back. He will definitely hear this, and I don't know. I've already insulted Brian Lumley, so George R. Martin, why not as well? If George R. Martin told to flame me on Twitter after this, then I think it's a job well done on all sides.
Yeah, now if he somehow listens to this and flames you, let's just both end the careers because it's not getting any better than that.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that would just be perfect symmetry.
All right. On a serious note, one of the goals of this podcast, besides making ridiculous jokes, is to highlight the kind of multifaceted sides of fantasy. You know, there's this common misconception that fantasy is this like male egocentric guy has to save the helpless princess consumed by neckbeards in their mom's basement who play video games all night and with riddled with misogyny. What about fantasy that you've brought to the genre kind of shows that there's broad general appeal to fantasy and there's something for everybody in it?
Ooh, interesting question. I mean, part of my particular gimmick, speaking as a straight white male and so forth, is and not being as undiverse as one could possibly be. I like the idea of sort of fantasy taken seriously. I mean, I'm a huge Tolkien fan. And I've always felt that the end of Lord of the Rings, while it's very reflective of Tolkien's own worldview and his religion and so forth, that the whole sort of it was very, very what the book is huge ordeal to get the ring to the fire. But it is very, very sort of narratively convenient that evil has basically a self-destruct button, and you do this one thing. And it's really, really hard to do, but you do it. And then barring a bit of cleanup out of the scarring of the Shire and so forth, that everything's going to be fine after that. And that's sort of one thing I've always tried to stay away from in the books I've done, is where basically there's no easy solution, and while the characters will come up with the solution for the current problem, that'll breed more problems. Again, sort of future spoiler of the books, like the end of the Gutter Prayer has this, I literally used the word eucatastrophe, which is a Tolkien word, where the characters do this thing and it defeats the enemies and changes the world and brings about this new order. And then book 2 is basically, here are all the ways the new order goes wrong. And then book 3 is basically responding to the book 2 ends in sort of similar, here's our grand plan to solve our nuclear problems. And the book 3 is, okay, that solved those problems, but created all these ones. And I mean, I am hoping that basically the books are going to over time head up towards a more stable and positive solution. But it's very much about iterating on the world has to be saved over and over, and what worked once won't necessarily work again, and there will always be messy compromises, as opposed to throwing into fire, everything is fine then.
I think that captured that perfectly. The juxtaposition to that question, which is probably the only serious question I asked there, is this is also the #1 podcast for talking about dick jokes in fantasy books, and you've got 2 very good ones.
Really?
Yes, and we could go through, and I'd like to go through those with you if that's okay.
Please, Joe. I don't recall them offhand, but
all right. Well, the first one is, I'm not risking anything for that slimy cock-faced goblin.
Dick joke is more of a dick comparison. I mean,
and then a classic joke.
The church. I'd also argue that is fair description.
The best insults have just a grain of truth in them.
That has a whole loaf of bread of truth.
And then a classic take on a great joke. The church guard has seen as much action in the last 30 years as the Patros holy cock.
I thought that's just me trying to be like the grimdark guys. I read other authors who are much better at doing the whole sort of rough masculine profanity of the Brotherhood of Soldiers and so forth. And it's not a register that I am super comfortable in. I mean, it's not that I don't use profanity, but that level of sort of bravado and confidence doesn't come easily to me. So that was
Okay.
me attempting it and then sort of running away from it.
I thought you nailed both of those, and good thing you didn't claim to not use profanity, because I'm pretty sure there's a sentence in the book that's like the fucking fuckers, fuck.
Oh yeah, I mean profanity. I have no problem with. I mean, although to be fair, have you ever watched The Thick of It?
Nah.
Oh my word, The Thick of It. Speaking like your odd places to get ideas from, The Thick of It is this BBC comedy series. Set base, and the main character in it is Malcolm Tucker, who is this political fixer and enforcer, played by Peter Capaldi, who was one of the more recent Doctor Who's.
Okay.
And he is basically notorious for these streams of creative invective. And when I was writing the book, I don't really like reading fantasy when I'm working on a fantasy book, because you don't want to
borrow too much.
Exactly, or like feel that you're sort of like following. If you're like weeks at the time, you sort of feel like okay, that is the template I should be following, as opposed to having off something. So because it was like avoiding fantasy material, was watching The Thick of It when I was writing Saint Helena for the first time, who was basically not a planned character. She was sort of like propped up, and basically a large chunk of Malcolm Tucker just went right. How would this guy work in a fantasy world? How would this character politicians and chunks of people work in a fantasy world? And turns out quite well.
Yeah, I mean that's got to be a fan favorite.
Yeah, probably shouldn't have killed her, but anyway.
On that note, I think that's all I got. Where can people find you?
GarethHanrahan.com is my website, which I update at least once a year. I'm on Twitter as Mytholder, which can't be spelled. It's MYTHOLDER, which is a username I've used, in fact, since the days when I was being flamed by Brian Lumley on Twitter. Or not Twitter, dear God. Dates me. But yeah, I've kept the same username online since 1997.
Oh my God, I was 5. Good job.
Jesus Christ, you disgust me. Yes, back in the before times.
Yeah, that's not registering. But where can people buy the books besides Amazon, where you can buy everything?
It's published by Orbit, so they are in I hope wide distribution. So your friendly local bookstore or your slightly unfriendly giant international conglomerate, whichever is most convenient for you. Yeah, they should be everywhere, I would hope.
Yeah, they are. I was just in Barnes & Noble and I found one of them. So Orbit's doing right by you. Thank you so much for taking the time out. I'd love to have you back on to talk the rest of the trilogy one day.
It's not a trilogy. At least 5 books.
Yes, of course. Well, the 3 books that are out.
Yeah, exactly, and hopefully more. But yeah, yes, I in some ways I do wish it had been a trilogy, because everyone assumes that fantasy books come in trilogies, and I have a rant about that. Yeah.
Let's hear it. You got the rant?
Excellent. Well, this would rant just more a factoid that the reason people go fantasy trilogies is because of Lord of the Rings.
Right.
And the reason Lord of the Rings was published as 3 books was just paper prices and binding back in the 1950s. There was no good reason why fantasy books come in trilogies other than a random budget decision by Ray Runyon or Onion and Sons, whatever they're called back in the day, about Tolkien trying to publish his giant book. I'm just amused that this decision made by some paper buyer back in the 50s has had this ridiculously outsized impact on the whole genre.
I am so happy to have ended on that rant. So shout out to J.R.R. Tolkien for both the positive and negative effects he's had on us all.
No, that wasn't Tolkien's fault, but yes.
All right, thank you. Talk to you soon.
No, thank you so much.
Gareth was a ton of fun. Truly a ton of fun. You can tell he's had some podcast experience. He's been on Wizards, Warriors, and Words more times than any sane human would ever want to be. I don't know what that says about him, but it's not good. It's not good. I can't wait to talk about the Shadow Saint with him, and I'll never call this book a trilogy again. Let's get into these closing statements because I've got more exciting stuff coming up. Books on the horizon. Still Wild Month. Priest of Bones by Peter McLean. And The Traitor God by Cameron Johnson. After that, I don't know. If you're an author, check your inbox because I might be sliding in. I think I've ran the gauntlet on this. So, keep on reading, everybody. Or something. Until next week. Peace.